The Slack notification came in the same minute Janine was microwaving her chamomile tea, 4 p.m. sharp, effective immediately. No subject line, no salutation. Just a digital execution disguised as a calendar invite. She stared at it like it had personally slapped her mother. 11 years at Caldas Solutions, and this was the courtesy she got, slaughtered by Slack like a damn intern who misspelled the CEO's name on a pitch deck. She walked to the conference room knowing something stank, and it wasn't just the egg salad Marcy from payroll insisted on storing in the communal fridge since Monday. The glass walls sparkled like a showroom for betrayal. Everything at Caldas had a sheen, gleaming surfaces, curated diversity posters, were a family, email footers, but the guts of it were cold rot. Janine had been watching that rot spread for years, masked in wellness seminars and Friday bagels. Now, before I go any further, let me say this real quick. 97% of folks who hear these stories don't hit that subscribe button. No pressure, but it's free. It helps more than you think. And I'm Trina hit my first ever 10,000 subscribers, so my mom stopped saying you still doing that YouTube hobby thing? All right, let's get back to the mess. Caldas Solutions, company that celebrated Janine with a $15 Starbucks gift card on her 10-year anniversary, but awarded the 29-year-old Chad, who once confused a Gantt chart, for a Spotify playlist with a $12,000 retention bonus. She wasn't flashy. She didn't schmooze. She didn't circle back or sync up in the way that made executives feel hard. What she did do was save 3 product launches, train 4 of her own bosses, and catch 2 six-figure billing errors that would have sunk their Q2. So when her access to the project dashboards mysteriously disappeared in April and she stopped getting copied on the monthly review chain, Janine didn't complain. She watched and logged and backed up. They thought they were ghosting her. She was building a case file. See, Janine knew how Caldas devoured its own. First, they'd hit you with the "your role is evolving" line. Then they'd start reshuffling responsibilities, quietly handing your accounts to someone younger, someone who played foosball with the COO. Next came the performance reviews, where vague criticisms like lacks innovation or could be more collaborative did the heavy lifting of pushing you toward the exit without a lawsuit. HR loved those phrases. Weaponized ambiguity was their favorite font. She watched it happen to a senior dev named Arjun, 15 years, an overnight after a team culture alignment survey mysteriously flagged him as a low fit. Vanessa, a recruiter with lupus, quietly laid off the week after she requested remote days for medical appointments. Caldas didn't fire people. It absorbed them, dissolved them, and then forgot they were ever there. Janine started keeping a folder on her desktop called Recipes. Inside were screenshots of emails, discrepancies in DEI metrics, Slack threads where one VP called a junior hire a diversity checkbox in heels. Password protected, time-stamped, offloaded weekly to a secure cloud. She didn't even know at first what she was building. Just that her gut kept whispering, "You're next." She noticed the little things first, when the supply closet stopped stocking her preferred highlighters, when her birthday didn't make the internal newsletter, when Chad, the aforementioned Spotify savant, presented a roadmap suspiciously similar to the one she outlined in a private doc last quarter. When the CTO complimented him for finally thinking strategically, Janine bit through her pen cap, but she still held hope. Maybe it was all a coincidence. Maybe corporate amnesia was just part of getting older in a young man's sandbox. She kept working, kept showing up, kept finishing projects no one remembered she'd started. Until one day in July, her proposal for the call-deceased pivot vanished. The one she'd stayed up working for a week while her dog recovered from surgery. It reappeared a week later under a different file name, under Chad's name. No one said a word, not a single CC, not even a thanks, just silence. That night, Janine renamed her folder, Insurance, and made 3 more backups. One went onto a freshly bought thumb drive with a kill switch she'd read about in a Reddit thread written by an ex-Fed. She didn't think she'd need it, but Caldas was already moving the chess pieces. And Janine Mitchell, she was done playing defense. The new VP's name was Landon. Of course it was. He wore all birds to leadership huddles and once described himself as a vibe curator. First day on the job, he made a big show of shaking everyone's hand, even the janitors, then turned around and called Janine Janet 3 times in the all hands. She corrected him once. He laughed like she'd told a joke he was too evolved to understand. Within a week, Landon had restructured their weekly syncs into fluid innovation pods. In English, that meant no agenda, no minutes, and no seat at the table for Janine. Projects she used to quarterback were suddenly being championed by Dylan, a 26-year-old analyst who still used Comic Sans and Dex, and once referred to GDPR as some European mood regulation thing. Janine didn't panic right away. This wasn't her first merry-go-round of ego-driven leadership. She'd seen 4 VPs come and go, each one bringing a new pet initiative, a new LinkedIn buzzword, and the same pattern of exhausting everyone into submission. So when Landon said she was too risk-averse for the pace we're cultivating, she smiled and replied, "I save risks for medical procedures and blackjack tables." The joke landed like a fart in a meditation class. Then came the board deck incident. A proposal Janine had been refining for 3 quarters, budget forecasts, rollout schedules, even the vendor contact list she'd built from scratch, appeared on the agenda under Dylan's name. Same title, same wording, right down to the typo she hadn't fixed yet. Dylan stood there, sleeves rolled up like he'd just coded it all by candlelight, and said, "This is a collaborative vision I pulled together with the team." Team in question consisted of a guy who thought net 30 was a soccer term, and a woman whose only contribution to the document was converting it to PDF. Janine said nothing during the presentation, but afterward, in the break room, she asked Dylan if he'd meant to leave her name off. He blinked at her. "Oh, I figured you were more into execution stuff." Execution. Like she was some middle manager guillotine operator just there to tidy up after the creatives. That afternoon, she walked into HR, sat down with Kristen, director of people and culture, which apparently meant referee for gaslighting Olympics. Janine explained what had happened: the erasure, the project theft, the sudden exclusion from strategy calls. Kristen nodded solemnly, the kind of nod you give a child holding a crayon drawing of a fire truck. "I hear you, Janine, but I wonder if this is more about perception than intent. Sometimes, in fast-paced environments, leadership styles can feel different being code for, he's a man, he's loud, and we're backing him." Janine leaned forward. "I've led 3 product launches to profit in the last 18 months. I've trained the guy who trained Dylan. What exactly do I need to perceive better?" Kristen smiled. "You're clearly very passionate." Janine left that meeting with her ears burning and her spine locked in ice. Passionate. Another pink-collar coffin nail. They called you passionate right before they called you difficult. They called you difficult right before they looped you out of the next hiring round. Then came the PIP. Then came the Slack message. She knew the rhythm. The slow fade into irrelevance wasn't random. It was curated, so she stopped asking for fairness. She stopped sending just circling back emails and stopped pretending to care about Landon's startup jargon. She bought a second thumb drive, activated screen recording software, turned her old iPad into a discrete audio logger. Every meeting, every passive-aggressive email, every discrepancy in access logs, she archived them all like she was prepping for trial. Because in her gut, she already knew she wasn't just being managed, she was being erased. The next day, her chair was missing from the daily stand-up. Literally, no chair. She stood there while Dylan talked over her with that blissful confidence only bestowed upon men who have never been interrupted in their lives. She didn't sit down. She started watching. It started with a lunch. Janine didn't eat with coworkers, not anymore. But that Wednesday, as she reheated her frozen tikka masala in the microwave that sounded like it was chewing gravel, she heard Yelena mutter figures under her breath while reading her screen. Yelena was a UX lead. Russian accent, blunt as a shovel, smarter than half the design team combined. Her desk had slowly migrated from front row to Siberian exile by the printers. She'd just been reassigned to work under a junior she used to mentor. Janine took her tray, sat down beside her, and said, "Let me guess. You just got looped out of something you built?" Yelena didn't look up. "Second time this month. Maybe I should get Botox and a golf hobby." Janine chuckled, then added, "Only if you want to be VP by next quarter." That lunch turned into a pattern. Whispered conversations in stairwells, parking lot updates after hours, a network of the overlooked, the bypassed, the not-quite culture fits. There was Marcus, the black DevOps engineer who hadn't been promoted in 5 years, despite certifications that made the CTO look like a hobbyist. There was Owen, a single dad in procurement who got written up for attendance irregularities because he left on time to pick up his daughter, after working through lunch every damn day. Janine started putting it together, not in rage, but with surgical calm, like watching mold form under a blacklight. Each of them told a variation of the same story: reduced responsibilities, surprise performance flags, and the final kiss of death, team rebalancing. That phrase had done more quiet firing than a decade of market downturns. What broke the seal wasn't a dramatic revelation, it was an internal newsletter. One of those self-congratulatory blasts from the DEI committee, boasting that Caldus had achieved internal parity across gender and racial representation for FY 2024. The pie charts glowed in corporate pastels. The caption read, "At Caldus, diversity isn't a metric, it's a mission." Janine almost snorted coffee through her nose, because she knew for a fact that Marcus was being replaced by a contractor in Phoenix, that Yelena's role was being dissolved, that the internal parity counted interns and contract workers, folks who wouldn't be on payroll next quarter. She opened the Excel spreadsheet she wasn't supposed to have. Back when she still had access to the team shared drive, before Landon had stripped her permissions, she'd copied over a full DEI data pull for a vendor compliance report. Nothing nefarious, just instinct, just curiosity. Now, comparing it to the public-facing numbers in the newsletter, they didn't match, not even close. Some names were duplicated, some were misgendered. One employee who'd quit last October was still listed as active to fluff the female representation metric. They'd padded the whole damn thing like a toddler's resume. And the kicker, that same data had been used in a bid for a federal subcontract, one that required strict demographic reporting under Section 342. That's when Janine stopped feeling tired. She felt ready. That night, she bought the thumb drive, not from Amazon, from a privacy site that shipped in unbranded packaging, with built-in encryption and a physical switch that wiped its contents in 5 seconds flat. She paid in crypto. She wrapped it in a sock and tucked it behind a loose tile in her laundry room. She wasn't just covering her ass anymore. She was assembling ammunition. The next morning, she slid back into work like nothing had changed, smiled at Dylan, complimented Kristen's new blouse, took notes in meetings. But her laptop was now dual-wired, her screen mirrored to a secure cloud storage account, time-stamped and metadata tracked. Every agenda she wasn't invited to, logged. Every document revision, archived. Yelena noticed. "You're quiet," she said in the stairwell. Janine replied, "I'm listening now." And for the first time in months, she meant it. The burner email account had a ridiculous name, Casserole Queen 48. Janine picked it on purpose. Something forgettable, something buried in a sea of suburban Pinterest moms and PTA chain letters. She used it to reach out to a journalist she'd followed quietly for years, Annika Farrell, an investigative bloodhound who'd cracked open 2 Fortune 500 labor lawsuits and once got subpoenaed by a private equity firm for exposing a fake union-busting training deck. Her first message was short: longtime employee, large software firm, suspected DEI fraud and labor retaliation. "I have documents. Can we talk off the record?" The reply came within 36 hours. Encrypted channel preferred. "My signal ID is below. I like casserole." They started chatting in short bursts. Janine never gave her real name, called herself Ember. Annika didn't pry, she knew the rhythm of scared people getting braver. Janine fed her breadcrumbs, mismatched promotion data, redacted emails, evidence of terminated employees showing up as active in federal filings. Annika was quiet at first. Then came the phrase that told Janine she was being taken seriously. "If even half of this checks out, this is criminal, not just shady." But Janine didn't stop there. She knew journalism might make the story public, but it wouldn't make it stick. She needed legality, ammunition that couldn't be PR spun into oblivion, so she went looking for a lawyer. Carefully. No calls from work, no firm with a name that ended in and Sons. She found one through an online whistleblower network, an attorney named Lena Muro, who'd worked under the Obama administration and now specialized in private retaliation cases. Janine sent a sanitized summary through Proton Mail. Lena agreed to a phone call, 1 hour, voice only. And even then, Janine paced her bedroom the whole time, clutching the phone like a detonator. Lena didn't make promises. She made lists. "This data you're describing, are these internal only, or were they submitted externally?" Janine, "Both." "Any financial incentives tied to them?" Janine, "Federal contracts. A few $100,000 in Q2 bonuses for VPs. I've got the bonus structure PDFs." Lena paused, then, "Janine, can I call you that?" "You can. If even a fraction of this is provable, you're sitting on multiple violations. Whistleblower protections will apply. But understand, once this goes public, there's no unringing the bell." Janine didn't hesitate. The bell's already ringing. They're just pretending it's wind chimes. Later that week, Caldis announced a landmark renewal with a major client, Vellum Technologies. Press release everywhere. Leadership grinning like lottery winners. Landon posted a selfie of himself popping champagne beside the sales lead, captioned "winning quarter unlocked." But Janine knew that renewal wasn't clean. Vellum's procurement requirements had shifted 6 months ago. It added language about vendor diversity thresholds and ethical labor audits. Janine had been part of the initial outreach before she was shuffled into the shadows, and she remembered the numbers hadn't lined up. She checked her folder. Yep, she had the old data. Then she compared it to the renewal documentation released internally. The difference? 7% jump in female leadership. 3 new cultural affinity groups listed. Fabricated name tagged to an internal ethics committee that hadn't met in a year. They'd lied. Boldly, sloppily, publicly. That's when Janine did something she never thought she'd do. She scheduled a coffee meeting with an old coworker from finance, Theo, the guy who used to pass her spreadsheet Easter eggs about budget misallocations with sarcastic subject lines like "oopsie," another illegal thing. They met at Panera out by the highway. Janine slid a napkin across the table. "Do you remember that Vellum contract?" Theo blinked. "You mean the one where we moved funds from a paused initiative to make the margins look cleaner? You still have that napkin?" "Always." He stared at her. "You're actually going to do this, aren't you?" Janine sipped her tea. "It's already done. I'm just making sure the path I walk is paved in fireproof receipts." That night, she renamed the insurance folder. Landmines, she wasn't just documenting. She was preparing detonation coordinates. The irony hit like a pie to the face. Janine's final task, her swan song from the Core Finance Solutions vertical, was to clean up their books. Not some small petty cleanup either. No, they handed her a beautiful, steaming pile of corporate manure. Reconcile 12 months of inconsistently reported vendor invoices before a third-party audit next week. Landon, with his AI-generated empathy and vape-scented charm, dropped it on her desk with a smirk. "Thought of you for this, Janine. You're always so meticulous." She could smell the setup from across the cubicle wall. They wanted a scapegoat with neat handwriting. Someone reliable enough to handle numbers but invisible enough to disappear after they cooked. It was textbook. Give the problem to the quiet woman, then punish her when the mess is discovered. But they forgot one thing. Janine had already started building her kill switch. She rolled up her sleeves and dove in like a forensic pathologist at a crime scene. Vendor line items weren't just duplicated, they were Frankensteined. Purchase orders were written. Payment confirmations forged. A set of Q3 invoices had identical time stamps down to the second. Impossible unless someone was copy-pasting line items with the urgency of a man trying to outrun his karma. Then came the bonuses. Janine flagged a pattern, service retention adjustments issued to board members, cloaked under vendor reimbursements, 5 figures each, all authorized by an approval matrix that had conveniently been revised by Landon. She found his metadata signature. His greasy digital fingerprints were on every manipulated cell. This wasn't corner cutting. This wasn't corporate fuzziness. This was fraud. Her stomach dropped, not because she was shocked, but because she wasn't. She checked the executive compensation summary in the HR shared drive, buried under 6 tabs of irrelevant legalese. Each manipulated invoice lined up like bricks in a wall of lies. Bonus triggers were tied to milestones. The milestones had been achieved through fake data, puffed-up diversity numbers, doctored vendor receipts, and those payouts, they didn't just go to Landon, the CEO, the chief ethics officer, even Kristen from HR. The same Kristen who'd called Janine passionate like it was a terminal diagnosis, had a mysterious discretionary retention bonus 3 weeks after the Vellum contract. It was an orchestra of corruption, and Janine had been asked to tune the final violin. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the cold, surgical rage that only comes when you realize you've been used like a human mop for over a decade. 11 years of late nights, early mornings, birthday bagels, and PowerPoint hellscapes. Also, these glass office jackals could line their pockets and throw people like her to the curb. She paused, stared at her screen. Then, methodically, she opened her encryption software. First, she mirrored every spreadsheet, PDF, email thread, and Slack export to an external encrypted drive, separate from the one labeled landmines. This one she named Arson, just in case she needed more than a match. Next, she uploaded a second copy to an anonymous cloud storage service registered in Switzerland. She set 2-factor authentication using a burner phone taped under her desk drawer and buried the access key in the metadata of an unrelated cat photo titled Mr. Socks Loves Lasagna JPG. Another backup went to a secure thumb drive hidden inside an old Altoids tin beneath her bathroom sink. She even stashed one in her mother's attic, disguised as a backup of childhood photos. Janine wasn't just covering her trail. She was building a network of tripwires. One accidental leak, one ND land backroom threat, one midnight data purge, and a digital bomb would land in the inbox of a reporter, a labor attorney, and a federal compliance officer in 3 different time zones. When she walked out of the office that evening, no one noticed her. Not Dylan with his ergonomic latte warmer, not Kristen squinting at her ring light, not Landon deep in a Slack thread about gamifying our pipeline. But Janine knew. They weren't running a company. They were laundering their legacies, and she wasn't going to clean it for them. She was going to collapse it. At exactly 4:00 p.m. on a Thursday, because of course it was Thursday, the traditional corporate day of bloodletting, Slack let out a cascade of cheerful notification dings that felt like digital gunshots. Messages began to vanish. Channels archived. Janine's access to the finance server evaporated before her screen fully refreshed. And then the ping came, cold and sterile. HR, please join us in conference room C, effective immediately. Not Janine, not hi there, not even a damn period. Just instructions like she was a Roomba being redirected to the trash chute. She stood slowly. Her tea had gone cold. The sky outside was the color of a bruised peach. Everything inside her had gone silent. Not rage, not fear, just airless gravity. She smoothed her cardigan like she was walking into a dentist's office, then took the long hallway past the trophy wall they hadn't updated since the year she won Team MVP and got a mug with her name spelled wrong. The HR director was already waiting. Kristen, wrinkle-free, lip-glossed, radiating that botoxed calm usually reserved for cult leaders and sales reps on lithium. She gestured toward the glass table like Janine was being welcomed to a spa consultation. We're going through some restructuring, she said, as if she hadn't personally signed off on it 3 weeks ago. This isn't performance-related, of course. You've been a valued contributor. Kristen slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside, 2 weeks severance, the standard non-disparagement clause, and an NDA thick enough to stop a bullet. Tucked into the corner was a prepaid Uber card. How considerate. A one-way trip out of Caldas. Please exit quietly. No mess, no fuss. Janine opened the envelope slowly. Her hands didn't shake, not because she wasn't furious, but because she expected this. She had tasted the cold steel of corporate betrayal before. This was just the first time it was wearing lip gloss and a $900 blazer. Kristen watched her like a mall cop watches a teenager, ready to spring if she screamed, cried, begged, but Janine just nodded, then reached into her purse. Kristen's eyes flicked to the movement, her smile dimming by a watt. Janine pulled out a small matte black thumb drive, no logo, no label, sleek and sharp like a weapon from a spy movie. She placed it gently on the glass. "What's that?" Kristen asked, voice suddenly thinner. Janine didn't answer, just looked her straight in the eye and said, "You'll want your legal team before opening it." Kristen blinked, once, twice. Something shifted behind her eyes, fear, recognition, an urgent need to make a phone call. Then her assistant popped in with a polite knock, handed Kristen a tablet. Kristen glanced down and her face went pale, because on that screen was an email already sent. CC Ed to her, to the Caldas legal team, and more damningly, to the Department of Labor and one Lena Muro, JD. Subject line, formal complaint. Caldas Solutions labor and data ethics violations, with attachments. Kristen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Janine stood. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the chair. She didn't beg for her job back or threaten to tweet. She simply collected her purse, adjusted the scarf around her neck, and gave Kristen the same corporate smile she'd been fed for 11 years, and walked out of that glass box like a woman who'd just handed a match to a building made of lies and dry kindling. The thing about landmines? They don't scream when they're planted, they wait. The moment the thumb drive touched the glass, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Janine didn't slide it with flair. No flourish, no dramatics, just a slow, deliberate placement, like setting down a scalpel before the first incision. Her hand hovered a second longer than necessary, then retracted. She leaned back in the faux-leather chair like she was waiting for a delayed bus, not delivering a corporate death sentence. Kristen's eyes locked onto the matte black sliver of plastic like it was ticking. "What's that?" she asked, a little too quickly. Janine met her gaze, flat and unblinking. "You'll want your legal team before opening it." Silence, real silence, the kind that only exists in conference rooms when someone realizes they're not holding the cards anymore. Kristen's polished demeanor cracked, not in a scream or flinch, but in a subtle, instinctual shift of posture. Shoulders tensed, elbows tucked. Her jaw clenched just enough to betray her awareness of the shift in power. Then the door opened. Not dramatically, just a soft knock and a head poke. One of the HR assistants, Kelsey or whatever clone of corporate enthusiasm they'd hired last, stepped in holding an iPad. Sorry, Chris, but this just came through?" Kristen took it, tapped the screen, and there it was. Janine didn't have to see it. She knew exactly what it was. The email, sent 5 minutes earlier through her lawyer's secure server. Subject, whistleblower submission. Caldas Solutions diversity reporting, retaliation, and financial fraud. Recipients, Kristen Mueller, Director of HR, Caldas Legal, Department of Labor Whistleblower Division, and a little CC to Lena Muro-esque, just for flavor. The body of the email included 4 bullet-pointed allegations, 12 attached files, and a brief note that metadata verification had been completed. A friendly postscript reminded the recipients that whistleblower retaliation carries both civil and criminal penalties. Kristen's face went corpse white, not performatively. Not like an actress caught in a scandal. This was deeper. This was realization. The dawning horror of someone who'd always been protected, always been the gatekeeper, and had just been locked out of the gates. You sent this?" Janine stood, calm, not smug, not trembling, just clean and final. "You wanted me quiet," she said softly. "This is my silence, measured, documented, legally indexed." Kristen blinked like a deer trying to decode headlights. From the hallway, someone's voice laughed obliviously. Probably Dylan. Janine slung her purse over her shoulder. The strap had frayed at the edges, 11 years of dragging it between late nights, budget meetings, emergency pivot sessions, and forgotten birthdays. Today, it felt light. She looked around the conference room one last time, the motivational poster with the iceberg metaphor, the sad ficus in the corner, framed company values that had never been anything more than copy-pasted LinkedIn wallpaper. Then her eyes returned to the thumb drive, still sitting there, unassuming, silent, a guillotine in USB form. Janine didn't say goodbye, didn't nod, didn't flinch when Kristen opened her mouth like she might ask a question and realized too late there were no answers that would help her now. She walked to the elevator, didn't look back, behind her. Glass-walled room remained frozen. Thumb drive gleaming under fluorescent light like a talisman of justice no one had expected to meet today. Ding, the elevator doors closed. Janine exhaled, finally, fully like she hadn't breathed right in years. The first crack appeared in the morning meeting calendar, an all-staff town hall invite at 7:30 a.m. Monday, no subject, no agenda, mandatory. That alone set off alarms. Caldas didn't do mandatory. It did collaborative, transparent, culture-forward. But this smelled like containment. And by the time the Zoom feed lit up, half the leadership team's cameras were off, and the CEO, normally glowing with over-caffeinated startup energy, looked like a man who'd aged 3 fiscal quarters overnight. He cleared his throat. Twice. Some of you may have seen inaccurate headlines circulating this morning. The headlines were very much accurate. Janine had seen them the minute her phone buzzed with a Google alert at 6:04 a.m. Whistleblower alleges fraud, retaliation at software giant Caldas Solutions. The Verge federal inquiry, launched into DEI reporting violations by Caldas, pro-publica culture of erasure. Labor attorney speaks out after client exposes massive corporate cover-up. NBC Business. Now each headline was sharper than the last. Each article included excerpts, redacted documents, internal Slack threads with names blurred, but context intact. No one needed a decoder ring to figure out who had mocked Marcus's accent or ignored Yelena's disability request. One screenshot in particular, titled Day Dashboard V2 Final Thisomphorial, was already trending on LinkedIn, paired with hashtags like #IntegrityMatters and #JusticeAtWork. By noon, the first executive resigned to pursue new opportunities. By 3 p.m., two more followed. Kristen from HR deleted her Twitter and locked her LinkedIn. Landon, the vibe curator himself, posted a statement so bland it could have been AI-generated, then ghosted. Someone spotted him that weekend in Chalum, drinking mezcal with a woman who looked suspiciously like the firm's freelance wellness coach. Inside Caldas, panic had set in like mold in drywall. All company Slack channels were archived or locked. Employees were warned not to speak to press. A digital gag order in real time. But gossip moves faster than policy, and the whispers spread like fire in a server farm. Janine didn't gloat, she watched. She sat in her small kitchen with a chipped mug and a thrifted blanket over her lap, watching the implosion from the same laptop that once calculated a fraudulent Q2 forecast. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her phone buzzed every few hours, coworkers texting from burner numbers or personal emails just to say thank you. Janine, I cried reading the article. I thought I was crazy. You made me feel sane again. I never knew you were collecting all that. Thank you, seriously. One message just said, I can breathe again. She responded to every single one, not with I told you so, not with smugness, but with grace, because this wasn't just about her. It was about everyone they'd ghosted out of the building. Every woman who watched her ideas get pitched by a guy in khakis the next day. Every parent penalized for having a kid. Every accent they mimicked behind closed doors. Every quiet soul who stayed late and got nothing for it but a manila envelope and a lecture about team culture. Then came the final blow. Caldus's biggest client, Vellum Technologies, released a terse public statement. Effective immediately. We are terminating our vendor contract with Caldus Solutions due to misrepresentation of internal reporting data. We remain committed to ethical partnerships. The value of that contract, $22.5 million annually, gone, just like that. Janine watched it happen with the same look a surgeon gives when the tumor comes out whole. She didn't cheer. She didn't pour champagne. She just turned her face toward the window and let the late afternoon sun hit her eyes. Inside her inbox sat 3 emails, one from a journalist, one from Lena, and one from an HR director at a different firm, asking if she'd ever consider consulting. The collapse had begun. But the scale of it, the depth of it, that was still hidden under the rubble. And Janine, she still had matches left. The TV above the coffee bar was tuned to a muted CNBC segment. It didn't matter. Every caption read the same. Exclusive. Inside Caldus Solutions meltdown whistleblower unmasked. Janine didn't flinch. She just stirred her coffee, slow and steady, like she was watching a thunderstorm from the safety of a warm porch. The cafe buzzed with the sounds of keyboards, espresso steam, and one guy loudly zooming about brand pivoting. None of them knew the woman sitting in the corner, legs crossed, cardigan slightly frayed at the cuff, was the reason an $800M company had just thrown its entire C-suite into the blast zone. She tapped her screen. The exposé had gone live. Annika Farrell had done the damn thing, 5,200 words, 4 embedded videos, 24 images, and a clickable document archive that had already frozen the outlet's server twice in the last hour. Headline: The woman they tried to erase. How a soft-spoken project controller brought down Caldus Solutions from a glass conference room. The opening photo was stark. A single matte black thumb drive sitting on a glass table, the reflection underneath catching just enough light to make it look like a blade. No faces, no names, just the quiet weapon of a woman who had been overlooked one too many times. Inside the piece, Annika didn't just outline the fraud. She mapped the entire anatomy of the rot. DEI numbers fabricated, invoices tampered with, whistleblower retaliation documented to the minute. There were Slack screenshots, redline spreadsheets, and one particularly damning audio clip of Landon muttering optics are more important than metrics in a leadership huddle. They even embedded a timestamp file called Culture Sanitizer V3 FINA L Final PPTX. The comments section exploded. I worked there. Every word is true. This woman is a legend. I've never cried at an exposé before. She gave them receipts, grenades, and grace. Wow, hashtags were trending. Hash erased, no more hash thumb drive justice hash Janine vs Goliath, and the image, the thumb drive, was already being memed, turned into merch, tattooed on the internet's collective consciousness. Someone slapped it onto a tote bag with the words plug in, burn down. Janine chuckled into her sleeve. Her phone buzzed again. Email from a former Caldus intern. Thank you for blowing the doors open. You have no idea what this means to people like me. She did, though. She knew exactly. And it wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about Landon or Kristen or the CEO's fake commitment to equity-driven leadership. It was about every invisible person who kept the engine running while being told they were lucky just to be near the keys. Janine didn't respond, just looked out the cafe window as the sun hit the pavement like a spotlight. For the first time in 11 years, she had no calendar invites, no inbox clutter, no Monday dread clawing at her chest. She was free, not triumphant, not vindictive, just released. And as she tucked her phone into her coat pocket and picked up her coffee, she smiled. The kind of smile that happens when justice finally echoes in the bones of the building that tried to bury you. They gave me 2 weeks' pay to shut up, she whispered to herself. I gave them federal scrutiny, SEC subpoenas, and a legacy of fear. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.